What's something about you that sounds fake but is 100 true? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. At my peak, I was almost certainly in the top 1 of cherry pickers worldwide, pounds picked per season, and also per day. Personal record is 2,700 pounds in about 8 hours. Story 2. I misdialed a friend's number in the 1980s, but got the person I wanted at the wrong number. She was at her uncle's house. Story 3. I once failed every single class in high school and had to repeat the year. Somehow got into a good university with my story of failing high school, got good grades from college and grad school, got a good job at a top tech company, became a tech fellow in the company, and also a part-time teaching professor at a top university. Story 4. I've had exorcisms performed on me. I grew up in the charismatic church where they believe every ailment is caused by a demon. I had depression, anxiety, and ADHD, which were supposedly caused by demons. So on more than one occasion, they did deliverance sessions to try to cast the demons out of me. Disappointingly, nothing happened. Later in life, I found out demons dislike Adderall and Prozac. Story 5. I live in a country of only 17 million people. I once made a stupid animation video, put it on YouTube, and somehow it got more than 1 million views. A few years later, I made an album with 2 other guys. One of my songs somehow got more than 1 million streams on Spotify. We also did a TV gig with that band. More than 1 million people have watched that. Most of the people I know have no idea. Story 6. I'm in double digits for the amount of staircases I've fallen down. Not like a trip, broken a few bones. Answer. Same. I've also fallen while just standing, and I collapsed when I felt an ovarian cyst burst, thus breaking my foot upon collapse. When I went for a follow-up on that foot, my ankle was sprained on the other side. I had fallen again. Most times have been down flights of stairs, but several times have been just my body not cooperating or being weak due to pain or responding to pain. When I came in with the sprained ankle as well, that then made the doctor look closer at the imaging done in my follow-up, and he pointed to all these spots of bone chipping, indicating I had broken my foot many times without knowing it. I do deal with chronic pain, but that's when I realized how high my pain tolerance was. Story 7. I have been diagnosed by a psychologist with an extremely strange form of hyperthymesia. I cannot forget information relating to a human, names, dates, dresses, faces, entire conversations verbatim. Feelings, they do not fade or leave my memory, ever. This only applies to real people. Fictional people just don't trigger it for some reason. In other subjects, my memory is rather mediocre. It started when I was 4, and I can recall anything related to a person ever since with perfect recollection. Answer, oh wow, I didn't know this had a name. I have a very mild, compared with yours, version of this. I can remember phone numbers from 2nd grade of classmates that I never called, and I'm 45 years old. I can recall the moment I met someone, what they wore, how they came across, like my impression of who they were. Although conversation isn't as verbatim as yours, the gist of it is. However, if I am uninterested or uninvested in something or someone, it is gone the second it's out of sight. This was horrible as a student for teachers, parents, and myself. I would do schoolwork and not turn it in because, to me, there was no point. I was tested in kindergarten for the GATE, Gifted and Talented Education, sheesh, the 80s program, but my mother said she preferred I stay in regular classes. Thank you for sharing this. Now I can start looking into what this is. I just thought it was random. Story 8. I split my calf in half and walked a mile home, only to have adult beverage poured in it and an old shirt tied around it. It healed properly without medical intervention. Story 9. I've had guns pointed at me and been shot at multiple times in my life. The first time I was 8 years old, and the father of the kids I was babysitting came home with friends, proceeded to divvy up cocaine and plant substance to sell, got high and forgot. I took his sons to their bedroom so they wouldn't see all that. He burst into the room, pointing the gun at me, screaming, "Where my effing kids at?" And I just replied, "Right here, sir." And he dragged us out of the room and made us watch a Master P movie with him. The Last Don, IRC. I was 13 when I made a bad choice to follow a friend of mine into Detroit to meet friends of hers for plant substance. I'd never been high and wanted to see what it was like. They hotboxed an abandoned car while I stood around awkwardly. Because I chickened out, she wouldn't pay them with the method they wanted, and so we had to flee, with them firing upon us as we ran. Still don't know how I didn't get hit. I was 15 and followed another friend to her ex's house to retrieve the belongings she had left there. Not only did this grown jerk, age 30 man, try to run us down with his car, he shot at us. She got grazed, and again, I escaped injury. I was 22 and moved in with a 52-YO guy I thought I was in love with. He turned out to be a raging, harmful behavior alcoholic, and one night he got beyond partied too hard, pulled his loaded .45 out of his dresser, and told me, "I could shoot you right now and bury you in the backyard. No one would search for you. Your family dislike you, but I love you, but I don't like you." He readied the gun to fire at me, and I just laughed and said, "Put that away," and he did. I left a couple days later after he tried to make me choose between staying with him or keeping my dog. Always choose the dog. 2021, I had just left the local laundromat I used to go to and was driving home when an SUV pulled up to this dive bar down the street, and the occupants got out and fired into the bar. The shots that came from the bar narrowly avoided the important parts of my car as I drove by. One bullet hit a trim piece at the bottom. I was on the phone at the time, so my friend heard me laughing in disbelief that I was in this situation. 2023, the last time. New neighbors were substances dealers, got into a scuffle with teenagers, and decided to fire out their second-floor window at the teens right as I was leaving to go get Wendy's for my kid. The teenagers scattered like roaches as they ran in front of and behind my car as I slowly drove by. I saw the sparks from the bullets hitting the ground behind my car. Because the sound was muffled by my music, I wrote it off as kids playing with fireworks until I returned home to a heavy police presence. They and my landlord did not understand how my car was not riddled with bullets. I drove right through the lines of fire. TLDR. I am apparently a crucial NPC and have no self-preservation. Story 10. Two sisters tried to get me into a three-way once. I put them in a cab and sent them home. They stopped into my inner-city apartment while out clubbing. Also, no, I am not gay, LOL. Story 11. I was born in the middle of nowhere Mojave Desert a week after Friday the 13th on a full moon. There was a known occult coven in the area that was rumored to steal and take down newborns on full moons. My parents didn't know if this was true or not, but just in case, my father spent my first night in this world sitting sentinel by my crib with a shotgun on his lap and our pet coyote by his side, watching and waiting. Story 12. Used to be a go-go dancer. Lived out of my Jeep for 2 years and made money by spitting fire on the beach. Story 13. I once smacked someone so hard she came back to life. Some random townie girl that wasn't even invited had the audacity to bring a bunch of substances, do a bunch of substances, OD on a bunch of substances, and die at a friend's party early in my college years. It took a couple of my friends forever to get her heart going again, but they just couldn't get her breathing. Then panic took them both out before they could finish. No one else was doing anything aside from freaking TF out, so I knelt down and tried for a bit, also without success. I even tried sternal rubs like I always see in shows, also to no avail. I don't know who, but someone suggested smacking her, and since panic was already starting to take me out too, I miscalculated. I wound my arm all the way back and brought down the entire fury of the heavens. I smacked her so hard, my ears are still ringing, LOL, and she shot straight up in a gasping breath, scaring the absolute shoot out of me. Then she just got up like she didn't just die and managed to bail before the ambulance got there. Story 14. I get birthday cards from a man convicted of takedown that I've never met but have heard of before thanks to Netflix. Story 15. I remember stuff from my life from the earliest childhood. The earliest memory I remember is a park in other country where we were living then, where my mom used to take me in a stroller. I was one. Most of people don't believe me. My mom didn't until I described her the building, the park, and the view in details. Answer, I clearly and distinctly remember my first birthday. My parents didn't believe me until I described the exact room it was in, the window I could see out from my high chair, and being really upset that all the kids were playing in the backyard without me. Things I didn't have any way of knowing unless I remembered. I remember my aunt being upset and crying while holding me. Turns out her father-in-law was a pilot and had crashed a week before, not surviving. Just thing after thing I remembered until it became clear to my parents I remembered it all. As an adult, I was diagnosed with the autism, and my memory for many things is pretty crazy. Story 16. I have 3 master's degrees and a law degree, but I was never taught, nor do I fully understand the theory of evolution. I've been blessed by the Dalai Lama. Joe Biden once told me I was a good-looking young man. Answer, I've been blessed by the DL too. Amazing experience. I have a master's and PhD, and I'm not sure I fully understand evolution completely either. But the closest I've come to having a Joe Biden experience is I got to see Al Gore arrive to greet astronauts who had just completed a mission. But he was never elected prez, and worse, he didn't tell me I was good-looking. Story 17. urgent care sent me to the ER with a note that said I needed some kind of scan. I don't remember much since I was literally concussed, but I remember the note said possibly life-threatening on it. Anyway, ER asked me barely any questions about my actual injury, but a bunch of questions about if I'm being harmful behavior. Then they stuck me on a bed in a hallway for 3 hours in front of a really loud TV. They checked on me exactly once, and it was just them being confused by the elevation and ice part of my urgent care note because they couldn't figure out on their own that I had 2 injuries listed. The doctor finally came and had me follow a finger and sent me home. The only actual test they did on me was they checked my blood pressure twice. The second time was because it was high the first time, so they wanted to confirm it before I left. It's been over a year, and my nose still hurts, and I'm jumping through hoops with doctors to figure out a balance issue, and TBH, my memory and attention span and mood have been going downhill too. I'm sick of doctors not being able to tell me what might be wrong with me if it's out of their specialty, because that's speculation. Please just tell me the correct type of doctor or give me a list of types. Please, I want my life back. Answer. First of all, I have to say that I am so sorry you had to go through this painful and long experience. What happened in the ER seems inadequate and inappropriate, especially considering the possibly life-threatening note from the urgent care center. It is truly disappointing that a year later you are still dealing with complications and no one is being held accountable. Your starting point should be a good neurologist. Have him or her examine both your brain and balance issues and refer you to an ENT specialist if necessary. I know you're tired and angry, and rightly so. The system has failed to take care of you properly, but now you need to take control with a new focused plan. Seek out doctors who are experienced in post-concussion syndrome. You're not alone, and these symptoms can be recognized and managed with proper assessment. I hope you can finally find a doctor who will listen to you and take the first effective step toward getting your life back. Stay strong. Story 18. I'm a twin, and we both have scars from separate accidents on the same part of our bodies. I was sliced and he was impaled. Both were deep wounds and required going to the ER for lots of stitches. These events occurred about 15 years apart. Story 19. Just learned how to ride a bike at 30, literally last week. It's the proudest moment for me, and I have a PhD LMAO. Childhood things you achieve as an adult just mean more. Story 20. I'm a 45-year-old man. I can have multiple consecutive orgasms, complete with ejaculation. I literally have to have 2 back-to-back because the first one is rather numb. They get increasingly more intense. Most I've achieved is 6 in a 10-minute time frame, but I've had to stop pushing past 3 because it feels like my heart will pop. In a related note, aging sucks. Story 21. I once was invited to the bridge of the Disney Magic cruise ship and turned the ship's wheel while in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So I've technically driven a car, truck, airplane, and cruise ship. Story 22. Dame Shirley Bassey took a shine to me when I was working at a show and gave me a bottle of Dom Perignon and a lend of a chauffeur-driven car to take me back to my student gaff in East London in 2011. Story 23. I predicted 2 family members' deaths as a child, was a state away at the time of the prediction, and one of them I had predicted died that day and wasn't found for 2 weeks. I've also saved my mom's life 4 times by coming in at the right time, forcing her to take me with her for 2 car rides, and tried to persuade my partner to let me come over earlier than planned and wait for her grandparent to come back before we left. Turns out, right at the time I kept bugging them about it, their grandparent had gotten into a car accident. I kept getting more and more anxious during the next hour. Right as I was grabbing my keys and about to get in the car, she called me worried about her grandparent. At that point, I was running for the car, and she had a knock on the door from a person coming to notify her. I also saw a ghost in a family member's old house I moved to as a child. After asking my mom about it, it turns out that was where my uncle's mother-in-law shot her husband. So yeah, I'm something of a psychic. Answer. I'm no psychic, but my family has a legend. Bird in the house means passing in the family. We had a bird get stuck in the chimney. I tried to force it to go up and out, but it just wouldn't. Finally, I opened the flue and it immediately came down and flew around the room. About an hour later, I got a call that my sister-in-law had gone into labor and lost the baby. We were in the hospital about 2 days as my father-in-law was dying. He died and we went home. There was a dead bird right inside the front door. It's the only 2 times we've had birds in the house. Story 24. I was a background rando in both The Vikings and Game of Thrones. In both cases, my whole role was standing in the background, while menacingly sporting long hair and a beard. There are pass-by shots with my face in them in several episodes of both shows, since being cold and uncomfortable for hours on end gave me the properly grim Northern Barbarian frown. Story 25. Twice, my blood pressure dropped so low that I couldn't move. Both times I was admitted to hospital and put on a saline drip to bring my blood pressure back up. Doctors never even had any theories as to possible causes. Edit. Both instances were years before COVID. The second one coincided with a stomach bug that had symptoms of vomiting and diarrhea, so I may have been dehydrated. The first instance, I was perfectly healthy, but had some stress dealing with bureaucracy earlier in the day. Story 26. I had a hole in my esophagus like 10 years ago, causing air to leak out and under my skin, in my neck and face. It felt like that green styrofoam stuff they put flowers in at funerals. They don't know how it happened, and they don't know how it closed, but they said if it reopens for any reason in the future, they don't know how if they can fix it. They told me to beware of chicken bones and making sure I chew chips properly. Even vomiting too hard could reopen it, and they don't know if they would be able to close it and save my life. So every day I live my life so close to the border of life and passing, I try to use it as a reason not to deal with too much bullshit, because I really never know when I'm gonna go. Story 27. I worked in a bank in South Africa and had to set up for the board meeting. I used the chairman's elevator to get there quickly. Doors opened, and there was the chairman and Nelson Mandela. Story 28. I lived on a llama farm once when I was a kid. Llamas are assholes. My two front teeth came out fused together and only one grew back. So I have one middle tooth and the rest of my teeth shifted forward. I have TMJ, but I have no clue if the tooth thing plays into it. Counting deceased, living, full, half and step, I have about 12, 14 siblings. Story 29. Way less exciting than most of these comments, but worked for a small business and made professional hula hoops. I manufactured plus shipped more than 30 pro hula hoops a day, and I can't even keep a hoop up more than a second. I didn't even learn tricks until I left. Story 30. My ex-wife cheated on me with my ex-best friend because she wanted to know what another male body part feels like. Then she divorced me to be with him, then cut me out of my life I'd built with her. This led to massive depression, which led to a DUI, lost custody of my children because mentally I couldn't take care of them, and loss of my career. All of this happened in a span of 2 years. I haven't seen my kids in 2 years because she refuses to let me. I cannot for the life of me get a full-time job to support myself, so I'm effectively homeless, have no family, have no friends, all because my ex-wife wanted to know what another male body part feels like. I think about eliminate myself often. Story 31. I once embezzled a client's money. I had a bad debt with bookies and was going to be shorter as they were going to take my kneecaps. I asked a friend to place the money on a horse for me, as I was well known around the courses. She bet the wrong horse. It won. We paid off the debt, and I put the money back in my customer's account. They never knew. And we got married and had a wonderful life together till she sadly passed away. I have never gambled again since that day. Story 32. Twice I have hit a pedestrian, and both times the police thanked me. First one, driving home from university, commuter. Someone ran into the road. I slammed on my brakes and guy landed on hood of car. 3 police officers piled on him, handcuff him on my hood, and one turns to me and says, "Thank you, you can leave." Get home, tell mom. We are watching the news, and story on news is about how a bank robber was caught by 3 police officers. No, they didn't. I did. Second one, driving home from work, get off freeway, turn left, turn right at light, turn right onto my street. As I am driving up my street, someone runs out form between parked cars and lands smack on my hood. 2 police officers appear and jump on guy and handcuff him on my car hood. One turns to me and says, "Thanks for your help. You can leave." Next day, read in the paper about how they were chasing someone. He got off freeway, tried to drive around behind the Kmart and ran into wall, got out, jumped wall, and was caught by 2 officers. No, they didn't. I did. Story 33. I chased down a tipsy driver and forced her to pull over and got someone on the sidewalk to call the police. It was in Manhattan at night. I was riding a 3-speed Mary Poppins style bicycle. Story 34. I have easily lost 10 to 50 pounds in my life multiple times by simply eating less. No change in diet, as in eating healthier foods. I still ate crap, just less of it. No exercise, no nothing. I simply ate fewer calories every day. Story 35. When I was younger, my brother and I would try to beat Super Mario World as fast as possible and use a stopwatch to time it. Years later, we found the internet has speedrun records and learned our times on the unmoded console were between 3rd and 4th for the world. Story 36. I am followed online by an international star for no good reason. You know her name? Everyone does. I have no clue why it happened, but it's awesome. Also, I was born into a cult, LOL. Story 37. I halted the sale of a product for up to 2,000 merchants in my state by placing 3 bottles on a counter and saying, "Prove it." Story 38. Eminem called my mom's house to talk to me. A month later, Snow, artist who sang Informer, called my mom's house to talk to me also. Story 39. I am a diagnosed sociopath. They call it something else now, but about one of the population has antisocial personality disorder. Sociopaths aren't just people who lack empathy because we're evil. Our brains are wired differently. You can see it in an MRI scan. While sociopaths are overrepresented among violent criminals, it's still a spectrum, and plenty of us live ordinary lives. Please don't use sociopath as an insult. We can't change the way we are. Story 40. One Monday at school in 1980, I had a test for every single class period that day. Some were expected, but a good set were complete surprises. 40 years later, still can't believe all those teachers just accidentally decided to give us tests that day independently. Story 41. I have 20/10 vision in my left eye, 20/15 in my right eye, and can blur my vision at will. Never found a use for the blurring sight except for 3D posters. Answer. Not me, but my cousin had really bad eyesight up until middle school, like thick, jerk Coke bottle lenses that bent reality bad. Then one day he was sitting in the stands at a high school baseball game and got hit hard directly in the face by a baseball. He had to go to the hospital and his face swelled up and was severely bruised for weeks. But once he recovered, he has had 20/20 vision ever since. He is now in his 50s. Story 42. I am a retired runway model. My mom got a discount from a high-end children's clothing store by having my sister and me do local runway shows in the 1970s. After a couple of years, I complained enough that we stopped. Story 43. I dated a musician, not well-known musician, just plays shows in my state. 2 years after we broke up, she released her first album. It includes 3 songs explicitly about me, 2 of which I helped write, also a musician. Story 44. I've known 15 people, either directly or indirectly, relatives of friends, that have committed tragic end. I took my friend to the morgue to identify her husband's body after he shot himself in the woods with a sawed-off shotgun. I will never forget her screams. He went to great lengths to make sure everything was set for her before he did it, right down to calling the life insurance and making sure they paid out on tragic end, which they did because he'd had it long enough. 2 of my schoolmates' moms eliminate themselves when we were young. My hairdresser hung herself in their barn. PSA. If you are struggling, please talk to someone. The families never get over it. Story 45. I have been to Lama Lotso, the lake in Tibet where they chose the next Dalai Lama. Also, in high school, some college, I worked at a store that legally sells human bones. Part of my job was cleaning dirty skulls and articulating spines. I am a 5'2", 120 white chick with only 2 tattoos for reference. Story 46. My income is 50x that of my brother, and I am constantly trying to find reasons to pay him to do things so that I can give him more money because it eliminates me to see him struggle when my bank balance is 6 figures. He has no idea. Story 47. Copying my answer to a similar question. Well, so many peculiarities and dysfunction in my body. I cannot hope to cover even a fraction of the things my body does weirdly. As far as I know, it all started when I was 8, 10-ish. I ran into a door with a wooden skewer in my mouth, pointy end towards throat, which became pointy end through throat. Not the dumbest choice I made that day. That was the decision to not tell anyone about the accident and manage my way through the excruciating pain whenever I took a breath, ate, or drank, or just swallowing saliva. Unbelievably, neither my 2 older brothers or parents picked up on what had happened. I have recently asked them if they remember this incident, and they do not at all. Mom said perhaps that was when you suddenly became a very picky eater. Sounds likely. So, that is the initial damage which began the daisy chain of abnormal muscular functions. By that I mean in order to breathe and eat, I recall sitting in a very specific position with one hand holding the back of my neck, massaging the neck to ease the pain. To eat, I would use my tongue to throw food to the side of my mouth, where the pockets of air used in circular breathing push the food toward the throat. I would then use my neck and back muscles to accomplish the rest, till the food was past the wound and I could safely swallow with considerable pain. I had blocked this memory out, and it took a long time to surface, 30 years. By doing these motions over and over, my whole mouth changed shape, my jaw misaligned. When I drew and breathed, e.g., through a cigarette, I had no control over the power. It was either none or super vacuum. I can suck up objects from a few centimeters away, with my lips pursed. When I have food in my mouth, I can drink fluid and it will take a route to my throat that does not contact the food at all. A very handy ability. Not sure if others can do this as well. My vocal cords are messed up. Some ranges of voice do not work at all. As in, I try to sing in that range and nothing budges and nothing comes out. Other notes are shifted, like the chords have a clamp thing on guitar for holding strings at a fret. I make squeaky noises when I breathe in and out. My voice has shifted a number of times over the years, beyond normal puberty-related changes. I can touch my uvula with the tip of my tongue. I recently learned this is part of a deep meditation technique involving the tongue doubling over and stretching to go up the nasal cavity, from what I recall. My eyes rotate out of sync. I can see very well, but my depth perception is always slightly off and changes if I tilt my head differently. Made adjusting any hand-eye coordination task really, really hard, e.g. shooting a basketball, pitching a baseball, hitting a snooker ball, etc. If I hit too far to the left, I should aim a little to the right. But where I think a little to the right is and where it actually is are not the same. The difference is so slight, I just thought I sucked at aiming, which matched my general athletic ability. My neck would no longer extend properly, and muscles became tighter and more rigid over the years. Until 5 years ago when I could not tolerate the chronic pain I was in and started to do something about it. My sinuses are weird. If I hold my nose and blow, I don't reach a vacuum. Air comes out my eyes. This made scuba diving weird and painful until I figured I had to do exactly what you are trained not to do. Block nose and blow really, really, really hard until I hear a super high-pitched noise coming through a tiny gap in the eardrum. The force I had to use would easily perforate anyone else's eardrum. Have harmful behavior in my ears in terms of volume. Concerts, playing drums with little to no protection. Sometimes I have tinnitus, but then go months with no tinnitus. That is just the head and neck. My whole body is affected and not much works as it should. Major nerves and veins in my neck become constricted with movement, and this affects things like my ability to perceive the cold, as well as regulate my body temperature. Shoot's weird, but I can still walk, talk, and most normal functions, just not correctly or with ease. Story 48. I've dated and broken up with 3 unicorns, almost in a row within 6-ish years. First one hit literally every perfect woman point. Broke up after she moved after a promotion she said she was too young for marriage. Second one was my absolute soulmate, who was an MIT graduate at age 22 and was working for SpaceX on the same floor as Musk before his political craziness. Broke up because she was a workaholic who almost died twice from stress-related causes. Fun fact, before we met, she took her work cell phone and laptop to the hospital while in labor. Third one was a literal figurative unicorn, NSFW type, who was also a former runway model from Tanzania for an agency called IMG. Free use, threesomes, of, the whole shebang. Broke up because she had NPD, which I guess makes sense. Story 49. I got cancer twice, both completely unrelated to each other within a 10-year span. Beat it both times. Story 50. When I was a child, I stomped out the windshield of a car and also escaped the highest level of mental health care my state could provide. Oh, and I was born with 3 nipples, but one slowly reabsorbed as I grew up. Story 51. Out there somewhere, I have a truly evil twin brother. I won't go into his crimes. We lost contact many moons ago. I see someone else has had this too, but I've also been held hostage twice, unfortunately. Both times were deeply traumatic, and I'm not sure he'll ever fully recover from those experiences. Today, I'm based in the UK, but I'm paid to travel the world, mostly Southeast Asia, Africa, South America, advocating for vulnerable animals. I won't say which species, because I may be identified from that. Despite dealing with a lot of trauma and worrying about if when said twin might show up, I get a lot of satisfaction that I'm doing good in the world for beings without a voice. Story 52. I was a highly paid IT consultant who knew almost nothing about computers my first day on the job. I was hired into the position when I was standing center stage during a rehearsal for a melodrama about a Canadian Mountie. I got the part in the musical when I was a lumberjack who was moonlighting as a flamethrower operator on prairie reclamation projects. The IT job eventually gave way to an online journalism career that promoted me to a job in Los Angeles. As a result, you have seen me on It's Always Sunny, Entourage, several episodes of The Office, Deadwood, The Tonight Show, Man on the Inside, and some other upcoming shows. My wife knows all of this, but I don't think anyone else in my life knows or would care about the TV stuff. My kids have seen me on TV. The Office is one of their favorite shows, but they didn't recognize me because back then I didn't have a beard. I have evidence that I am outwardly an uninteresting person. I have very few friends now, though I try regularly to make new friends and connections. I believe wholeheartedly in the loneliness epidemic. My family and I feel like outsiders, though we have been here for decades. It breaks my heart to see my kids struggling to find their people. I fight regularly with depression, and some days have trouble standing up to get out of bed. And so I thank all that is holy for the days I get to be on set. I feel like I belong for a few hours and really enjoy those rare opportunities to be an actor type. Of course, that is a world that is shrinking, and so those opportunities are much fewer and far between, which brings me back to the depression thing. I've had a marvelous life and didn't end up important or noteworthy. Still, I look back on it all and marvel, I didn't even tell you the half of it. Story 53. At the time the news broke about Magic Johnson having over 300 intimacy partners and contracting HIV, I did some math and lost count of mine, estimating 700, 800. I was 25 and couldn't bear to go more than 2 or 3 days without at least one new encounter, often more than one a day. It was easy since I was gay, at least average looking, and generally persuasive. This went on for years after that, so who knows how high the number went, but now am utterly unconcerned about intimacy and haven't sought it with anyone for close to a decade. Luckily, I remain HIV negative. Story 54. When I was 12 years old, I pitched a perfect game playing for my Little League team. 18 batters faced, 18 strikeouts. I didn't even know what a perfect game was. I thought I had a no-hitter going. After final strikeout, everyone came and jumped on me and told me what I did. They didn't mention it during game to not jinx it. Ended up with a nice trophy, local media attention, and got to be in Sports Illustrated for kids. I tell people now they don't believe me until I show them the trophy in my man cave. Fun time. Story 55. I used to be hot, like hot. You'd never in a million years think so now. I also have a very, very high IQ, apparently, and yet I'm the dumbest person I know personally. Story 56. A long time ago, when I was in a pub with my friends, a guy came up to me, gave me his card, and told me he had been eavesdropping and thought I'd be good at stand-up comedy and I should give him a call if I was interested. I didn't, and no one believes me when I tell them this. I was once a guest of the Malaysian embassy in Buenos Aires. I have no connection to Malaysia. How this came about is I got 2 free tickets to go anywhere on the network of the airline I worked for, invited a friend of mine. She worked with a Malaysian girl who said, "Oh, my sister lives there." So my friend offered to take some stuff over for her, which she did, and once delivered to the sister, we were invited out for dinner. The sister worked for the Malaysian embassy, was not the ambassador, but someone of relative importance. We were picked up from our youth hostel by this swish car and then taken home again afterwards. I would not be able to locate this restaurant again if you paid me, but it was very, very good. And then we were driven home again. Story 57. I sometimes know things other people in my life are doing because I sense a smell or a taste, or just randomly think of something that could not be coming from around me and is nowhere in my vicinity. So I intuitively think, where could this be from? And a person I know comes to mind. And when this happens, I usually text that person, for example, "Hey, where did you get strawberries?" And get the answer, "WTF. How did you know?" It happens rarely. Sometimes I also get false flags. I ask and they say, "Nope, it's not me." Because people that are close know I sometimes like to guess things and got used to me asking things out of the blue like, "Hey, is there a cinnamon bun next to you?" Or "Did you just look at a yellow t-shirt?" Story 58. I started getting allergy shots, which are supposed to help your body slowly get used to whatever allergens bother it. It's really safe generally, and you only have to stay for about 30 minutes after the shot to make sure you are all right. After that, you usually have no side effects, and they literally say that there are no long-term side effects. I was happy about the shots at first because my nose stopped constantly running and I stopped sneezing all the time. But what I didn't notice were the headaches. I thought I was just stressed, maybe. I mean, it was the middle of the pandemic. Well, I am one of the rare people who apparently gets ill from the shots. They were giving me terrible headaches and making me feel like I had constant double ear infections for 3 years. My head hurt so bad that I couldn't think most days, just living in a total daze. I'm still having issues with concentrating even a year later, but it is better. The pain is at least gone. Story 59. I have been hit with steel chairs, been driven headfirst onto a sledgehammer on top of a steel chair, had a thumbtack stuck in my forehead so deep a friend couldn't even pull it out. I got thrown into an aluminum trash can. It bent around me. I got my head beaten into the ground by a 270 boss guy with an aluminum trash can lid, the wrestling days. Story 60. The first band I saw in concert was the B-52s, and have seen the Rolling Stones. I've also seen Bill Cosby do live stand-up. I'm under 35, yo. Story 61. While I was in high school, my father and I flew across the Bering Strait in our Cessna. We were the first Americans to enter Soviet airspace in 40 years. We followed the Lend-Lease route used in Wabuputu, all very official. It had taken a year to plan and get clearance. Story 62. I have a 8.5-inch cock. As a gay man, I swear it's true. Ask my friends, edit. Majority of my friends are straight. Story 63. I got an IQ in the 140s. You would never guess if you met me. Disclaimer before anyone starts. I've been properly tested, not some gibberish website. Story 64. I've got a few. 1, I wrote so many words for a novel in one day that my brain overheated. 2, I've worked in over 80 industries and have never spent less than 6 months in a job. 3, I used to be very unlawful. Story 65. My family knew Jeff Goldblum when I was a kid for a few years. My stepmom was besties with his first wife. I spent a summer living in the rainforests of Papua New Guinea, and on the way home, we smuggled Bibles into China. I was nearly caught by border agents in Shenzhen. This was when Hong Kong was still a British colony in 1987. I've tried almost every substances. Ecstasy was my favorite. I was in the Soviet Union when it was still a communist country. Also, communist Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. Story 66. I eliminate a bat by stomping on it with my bare foot, accidentally. I eliminate a big snake by riding over it with my bike, accidentally. I eliminate a massive spider by running into its web in a cornfield, accidentally, and smashing it with my bare hand, not accidentally, as it clung to my face, resulting in spider goo all over my face. Story 67. I got 4 years in juvie for stabbing a wannabe cholo's arm because he decided to try to choke me out one day. Needless to say, LAUSD takes possession of a weapon on their premises very seriously. Story 68. I made a hole-in-one the first time I ever played golf. I can't even really say played BC. I was 16 and went out with friends and used their clubs. I had never touched a golf club before. A friend was telling me how to strike the golf ball with the club, and I made a hole-in-one. It was from the ladies' tee box in a 3-par hole. I got a plaque and everything. Story 69. Came home from school and found my mom had committed tragic end, joined the circus and ran away, ended up in the mob. All true. Story 70. I wore odd socks when I got married 2 years ago. Didn't even realize and didn't care. We're both very chill and have a relaxed attitude about most things. Story 71. I've had 7 concussions but 0 brain damage, according to multiple MRIs. I figure I'm just one more head trauma away from being a vegetable because at some point my luck is going to run out. Note, I no longer snowboard, skate, roller, ice, board, or inline, ski, ride bikes, ride motorcycles, walk on slippery floors, horseback ride, or any other activity that could cause me to damage my skull. I even walk carefully now. Story 72. Within a 2-week span, I had 2 uncles, one on my mom's side and one on my dad's side, lose at least one finger in unrelated work accidents. Story 73. I have an obscure qualification that would allow me to manually calculate plane tickets if the power went out in an airport. Story 74. I was born in a mortuary. My parents worked there, had a small apartment inside. My mom was big into home births back then, I guess. Story 75. My dad's rivals broke into our apartment on the 6th floor via balcony, threatened to shoot me and ma'am, kicked my dad's face with the bat, and took all money we had. On Christmas Eve of all times, Ularos were fun. Story 76. Mosquitoes are afraid of me. I can walk directly into a swarm and they'll split and fly away. This provides mosquito protection to me and anyone at about 2 feet to any direction. My wife enjoys this superpower. Story 77. I was raised in a cult and made it out to the other side. Only 1 out of 11 kids in my house, 10 in another recruit's house, and 8 in the last. My father was the head of the cult. Story 78. When a stranger broke into my apartment in 2010 in broad daylight. It was the first ground floor apartment out of 6 in a big house on a main street across from a college campus. I was home alone and attacked, assaulted, almost violation, all by a man threatening me with a knife. In the final moments before he violationed me, I ran from the bad guy, tried to lock a door behind me. He chased me. He barreled through the door before I could lock it, knocking me back onto the floor. I remember I kept apologizing and was panicking as he walked over me with the knife. At that exact moment, another girl who lived upstairs in the house came home and slammed the main door to our porch communal hallway and stairwell. It was enough that the bad guy thought he was busted. He turned away and gave me time to jump up, lock my door, and grab my phone to call 911. Sometimes I wish I could hear my 911 call because I was so panicked, yet so focused. I just remember shooting off my full address, city, in state and telling them someone had a knife and was trying to violation me. The cops showed up in less than 2 minutes, but the guy had already ran with my laptop. I came out of my room when I knew the cops were the ones in the house, but was so in shock when I forced open my door. I kind of broke the door while slamming and locking it so hard, I couldn't even acknowledge the cops with guns drawn. I just stumbled past them rambling about some guy coming in our window and stealing my computer. Later, I was able to identify a guy in the detective's book of frequent offenders. He was sentenced to prison for at least 11 years a couple months later. But it was over 1 year later, I finally got my laptop back from evidence, as it was the smoking gun, so to speak, found at the guy's residence, which sealed his deal. When I powered it up, it said there was something in the Discord drive. I knew I wouldn't have had anything in there, so I popped it open. It was a DVD of Undercover Brother. I'll be honest, I laughed. It was so stupid, so dark, so absurd. It felt like something out of a terribly written movie. Story 79. During the pandemic, I skipped half the entire school year just playing Roblox, but never had any failing grades because I would always get perfect scores on my exams even though I never attended the classes. Also, I don't experience brain freeze, but rather eye freeze. When I eat cold things, the pain happens on my right eye, not my head. Story 80. I can scream louder than a plane taking off, measured at 123 dB, and that was holding back due to the space the measurement was done in. Story 81. Like 14 years ago, I was supposed to be on the first episode of Catfish before anyone knew it was Catfish. Talked to MTV and the producers, but when the cameramen were supposed to go to my long-distance girlfriend, she completely backtracked and ghosted me. Until months later, her name was Kinsey Duke, if anyone wants to find her for me. Story 82. I didn't know I was pregnant until 6 days before my son was born. He was full term. Sunday, home test confirms Monday. ER says I'm only 2 mo along. According to blood test Tuesday, called obese all day. Found a PD for Thursday, Wednesday. Bugging out Thursday. OB nurse says 5-6 mo look wise. OB does exam, says HA, no like 34 weeks. Can you come tomorrow for ultrasound? Friday, ultrasound tech going off crazy. This baby huge. Oh, it coming. Y'all probably got about 3 weeks Saturday. Go into labor, son arrives on 92323, 232345, 5 OLBs, 6 OOZ, and 2375 long. I was living on an unfinished bus with no running amenities, just a hose outside and an electrical cord through a window. Fully renovating the interior of a rental from studs from about 6 months pregnant, all essentially alone. His dad left me hanging so much. Doing side work of all types. I was on a roof the month prior replacing framing and roofing after a tree guy fudged up the garage roof, replacing floors, building custom cabinets, and working full-time teaching carpentry to juvenile detention residents in max security detainment. I'm going to buy a house in a few months, and we're doing so great now. Got a promotion and been able to lay off side work as much. Story 83. I had an uncle that was big into train sets, I guess more of a great uncle because he was related to my grandfather. I loved going over there and watching the miniature train sets go around and around. Anyway, one day I got very persistent about going there, and I said, either he's in danger or something like it's important something is wrong. That day we never went over there, and he committed tragic end. When my grandfather got the call, he looked like he'd seen a ghost because he knew he died exactly when I was nagging him to go. He would have found him if we went instead of his poor wife. It wasn't like we would have saved him, but IDK, my one truly horrible premonition. I'd also be able to tell who was calling my parents every time before they had caller ID. Story 84. A lot of my exes have died. I had a boyfriend who died from sleep apnea when I was 19. My kid's dad went missing in 2015. 2019, the guy I was dating when kid's dad went missing died from cirrhosis of the liver. 2017, a guy I dated when I was 23 died after being hit on a bike by a tipsy driver. It's so weird! Story 85. I am in a medical journal from when I was born. Had too much fluid in my body and it was very dangerous. Still managed to be born healthy and survive even though the odds were very low. Story 86. I was kicked out of both JR High and high school, never got a high school diploma, and graduated from Brown University. Brown was quite open-minded about my situation. To this day, I am a high school dropout, technically, although I have a master's degree. Story 87. I got Bill Clinton to sign my students' essays about him. I volunteered at a rally where he was speaking. They got my ticket mixed up, so the event organizer allowed my group to enter the arena first and got front row. I was a teacher's assistant for a Gov 1 class at the time and had a stack of papers in my backpack that needed grading. Ironically, they were essays about a president. 2 out of about 60 were on him. At the end of his speech, I shook his hand and asked if he would sign them, but said I couldn't speak to their quality. Story 88. I was attacked by a bunch of ostriches. I was at a petting zoo as a kid, and my mother wasn't paying attention. I'm still terrified of them. Story 89. My education stopped in the 4th grade because my parents were neglectful and harmful behavior. They were tired of CPS coming around, and so they took us 1K miles away and homeschooled me and my siblings. Except we didn't get the luxury of school or any education, so we just waited for time to pass. I left that state a while ago, and a few years ago, I enrolled into community college. I scored so low on the college AccuPlacer exam that I was in the absolute earliest math class available, and out of 300, scored 270 and 280 for reading and writing. Passed the first math class with a high B, failed second math because it was too much material all the time, and barely passed the second time. Otherwise, 3.8 GPA. I am in nursing school now. Story 90. I've said it before, but I got to be a scary clown during the scary clown sightings time frame. Spooked a bunch of friends staying after homecomings at my boss place. I got to climb on the roof and bang on their bedroom window, thanks to a ladder very enthusiastically supplied by the father. Story 91. I've been living for the past 7 years without a pancreas, spleen, gallbladder, appendix, part of my small intestine, the part where most nutrients are absorbed into your body, and 23 of my stomach. It was a 12-hour, very rare surgery. I take 30 pills every day, am completely insulin dependent, and have to take meds every time I eat to digest my food for me. It sucks, but I'm alive. Story 92. My sister and I have psychic medium abilities, and when we found out we had breast cancer at the same time, it was because a voice woke her up and told her we had no physical signs, no lumps or anything else, and we were in our 30s, so BC was not on our radar. It was a type of cancer that essentially looks like salt sprinkled on a black piece of paper. We both had mastectomies, and that should have been the end of it for early-stage disease. Then 3 years later, I unfortunately had a recurrence, and a similar experience happened because my intuition told me it returned. There was nothing to feel, but I insisted to the doctors that I could feel something small, about the size of a peppercorn, so they would oblige me to get scanned. Protocol requires you to get waste-of-time scans, such as ultrasounds first, and I begged them for 18 months for an MRI because I knew that was the only scan that could see it. And don't you know it? The patient was right. The cancer was back, and it was way bigger than a peppercorn, but fortunately localized. I often share my story with physicians because sometimes patients know things that defy explanation, and we need to be respected for that. Story 93. I birthed my own child completely by myself, unplanned. Most women get featured on the Today Show. For that, I got CPS called on me because the ambulance took too long. Then 10 years later, I dropped dead, then rose like a phoenix. Does anyone celebrate me? No. They just expect me to bounce back like nothing happened. I can't. Story 94. I had a ghost woman pin me down while I was in my bed watching a movie. I lost control of my body first, then I saw her at the end of the bed. That happened twice. No one believed me. I guess it just doesn't land the same as it does when you see it to when you're telling someone. Story 95. My lung spontaneously collapsed when I was 18, reinflated itself without any medical intervention, and when I went to Warped Tour 2004, before it had fully healed, I almost died in a yellow card mosh pit. Story 96. One of my closest friends tried to eliminate me, have me eliminate. He was in love with me, and I didn't want to be more than friends. My great-grandparents were scheduled to come over on the Titanic. My great-grandmother still had the ticket. It was probably discarded when she died in the 60s. Story 97. Americans electing the Fudge Phantom Menace to be your leader, twice. Good riddance and best wishes for repairing the damage someday. Story 98. A pedophile, a Nazi, and a white supremacist walked into the White House and took over the biggest economy in world history. Story 99. I've smashed my head in asphalt, concrete, ice, wood, metal. I have no brain damage at all. Also, I eat myself sometimes. Story 100. I've been in 5 different wars. I worked as a math teacher on a Native American reservation. I became an aerospace engineer, have lost $500,000 gambling over 20 years. I bought $500 of Bitcoin when it was still 50 cents a coin and spent it on Christmas presents when it hit a 1. Today, that would be worth $45 million. Story 101. IDK, nothing crazy or interesting, but some things that come to mind is I've ran the 4x48 unofficially, got a new PR on power cleans in high school. Same day I gave blood, held my breath for 3 or 4 minutes, can't recall, went without food for 6 or 7 days, almost never wore a jacket for years at around 14 or 15. First time I did coke, smoked plant substance, and almost got adult beverage poisoning was with my dad. Had a gun held to my face twice, one for mugging, the other for shoot and giggles. Almost had a group scene, but some guy was cock-blocking the shoot out of us. I also make more money than my brother and my mom. I went to boot camp and got washed out for diabetes that I don't have. And to top it all off, I don't have a license, nor do I know how to drive worth a shoot at 25 years old. Story 102. I once boarded the wrong plane by accident and realized once the plane was seated, missed my other flight. Story 103. I have a medical mystery. If I take a new medication or supplement, or even one I took but stopped, I get intractable muscle spasms. Screaming, crying, either the bones will break or the muscles will tear, feeling BC, something has to give. Spasms. Started with antibiotics, and they still give the quickest and worst reaction. Story 104. I've been twice divorced because my partners had affairs. Both of them ended up getting their side pieces pregnant with twins. Story 105. I'm physically missing about a ping-pong ball-sized chunk of my brain. It was resected, surgically removed to fix my seizure disorder. Story 106. A female coworker of my mother's hitched a ride to California from Alabama with my mom, my sister, and I when I was around 8 years old and my sister was around 11. The coworker's father lived close by where we were going. When the coworker got in the car, she held us up by gunpoint the entire way there, across country, in a time before cell phones. The woman clearly had mental problems, and when we made it to the father's house, my mom basically told him what happened and to get her help. Also that she would not be riding back with us. No, she did not get arrested for this. I don't know why. Somehow this woman got rehired at my mom's job later on, even though they knew what this woman did. Wild times. Story 107. I got stabbed, and it ended up in severe infection with my appendix being removed. A fight started outside a fast food place. Someone thought I was someone else. Story 108. I don't like potato. That one always seems to shock people. As in, it disgusts me and it always has, and I refuse it in all forms other than crisps. Side note, I have eerie, but before I was diagnosed, I was just called a fussy eater, and people would be like, oh yeah, I'm fussy too. Potatoes seemed to be the one that got people to realize I wasn't just trying to be quirky. Pasta, rice, noodle spaghetti, seeds of any kinds, and on it goes. Story 109. I have a naturally sensitive sense of smell. I can smell when my partner is getting sick before he knows it himself. When I go mushroom picking, I follow my sense of smell to find them and will in some cases know which mushrooms I will find according to their odor. I'm an expert in telling whether a food item on the brink of being spoiled is still edible. I sometimes cannot eat food because it stinks, because it's been wrapped in plastic, or it's been stirred with a silicone spoon. Story 110. Left school without GCSEs, but pretended I did. Eventually, I got my 3 A-levels, undergrad, and masters. Just because you are failing doesn't mean you're a failure forever. Sometimes you need to skip the first problem and come back to it later. Story 111. I used to do the One Punch Man workout every day before work. 100 consecutive push-ups, sit-ups, and squats, and for me, a 4-mile run. I never got up to 10 miles, but I got injured at work and had to stop doing push-ups. It hurt to do sit-ups or squats also, which made me give up on running. I gained at 50, 60 pounds, and I'm still working that off slowly. I've had people scoff or roll their eyes when I tell them and tell me that's impossible to do, especially with how overweight I am. Story 112. My hearing is so sensitive I can hear sounds that people normally are not able to hear, like very high frequencies. Story 113. I prevented a kidnapping, which also involved stopping an aircraft leaving an airport. I'm not even vaguely military, but I have been in a war zone. I've sworn at Paul McCartney. I've crossed the border between the USA and Mexico twice, illegally. I still can't poach an egg. Story 114. I have specific nerves attachments in my nails, which makes me feel them constantly. My mom told me that when I was an infant, as soon as I had teeth, I started trying to pull my nails out of my hands and feet. Doctor told me a few years ago, after some radios, that there were nerves under my nails that apparently clung to the carotenoid at birth and never separated correctly, making me a one-of-a-kind to them and very much unable to stop biting my nails. Story 115. Got thrown out of school at 16 with no qualifications. Now work in a posh private school with high attainment targets. Story 116. My high school was 4 days a week, and I skipped 80 days out of 142, failing multiple classes, but still managed to graduate with a 3.86 GPA and a 100 scholarship to a Florida university. Story 117. I was about 4 years old, living in a tropical country. One morning, I eagerly went to check on backyard chicken coop. At some point, I had a strange feeling to look up. When I did, I saw an anaconda coming for me. I ran out screaming with it chasing after me. At 4, I probably looked like a delicious, plump meal. The neighbors came running with their cutlass, chopping at it. I don't remember much after the chase, but I'm here to tell my story. Story 118. The day I turned 18, a white dove flew into my bedroom at home. I moved cities in 2 weeks, and it's just coincidence, but it felt like a good luck dude from above. Story 119. I delivered my second child in my house while the paramedic had literally just stepped outside to get something from the ambulance. Story 120. Not nearly as interesting as some of the others here, but nonetheless, I've moved 14 times in the last 8 years, 6 of which are just in the last 2 years. Story 121. I once ate only bread and mustard for 3 days. Of course, water, and there may have been some cheese, but that's about it. The salami slices were see-through, so that's why pretty much only bread and mustard in the sandwich. Story 122. I have been both a dwarf and a normal height person. I was real small as a kid, and when it got to be a big enough difference that it was really noticeable, the doctors did some testing and figured out my body doesn't produce growth hormone. So for 2 years, I got a shot in my thigh every day of human growth hormone. This was in the late 70s, early 80s, before synthetic was a thing, in order to reach a normal adult height of 5'8". Story 123. My sister fell out of her bed and broke her arm when we were kids. 3 days after she got the cast off, she fell out of the same bed and broke the other arm in exactly the same way. My parents moved her to the lower bunk after that. Story 124. I built a small pipe bomb when I was 13 and almost lost my right eye. It's about 85-90. I partied with snakeheads in Fuzhou, and I also met a hitman in Fuzhou, non-related to the parties with the snakeheads. Saved a baby from drowning. Story 125. I know that singer Lord Errol and Fitz, a YouTuber with 5 mil subs, so not as big, but still pretty big. Also, I genuinely dislike sunny weather. I don't get why people like it at all. It's way too bright, too hot, and you've got to worry about sunburn. Nothing enjoyable about it at all. Story 126. When I was a kid, I couldn't decide if I wanted to be a cardiovascular surgeon or a stand-up comedian. Proceeded to major in biology, but also did improv comedy all throughout college and still haven't made a choice. I also have signed a lot of NDAs in my life. I apparently don't give NDA energy, which is fine because I'm literally not allowed to talk about the rather dull details of any of them. Story 127. I ran a 22.24 200 meters at the beginning of track in high school as a freshman, 16-year-old. I could jump 6.8 on the high jump, which wasn't even my sport. I could do a standing jump and dunk a mini basketball because my standing vertical was just shy of 4 foot, I'm 6 foot. I lived in a small town, and this was before the internet in 1992. My coach wanted some points for the school, had signed me up for 110 marathon hurdles, which I could do but never really practice. 100 miles, 200 miles, and 4x 100 at a major state meet. I stress fractured my left foot on the hurdles in practice 2 days before that state meet. During the meet, several scouts from big colleges and universities were there and came to talk to me because they were specifically there for me and didn't know I was injured yet. My best non-recorded time before I broke my foot at that practice for the 200 meters was 21:58. For those of you who don't know, the current record for 200 meters is 19.18 seconds, set by Usain Bolt in 2009 when he was 22. The fracture was across the top of 3 of my metatarsals, bones that connect to your toes. That ended my track career. Story 128. I know when people I know are dying just died. I just feel it. When someone I know is about to die, even if he's really far away, I have a strong headache. I want to vomit, and I am suddenly exhausted, like I need to lay down. The first time it occurred to me, I thought I caught a bad flu. And then my brother called a few minutes later to tell me my uncle just died. A few months later, I felt the same, and my mother called me to tell me my aunt died. Now, when I feel like this, I know. It happened 3 times after that. Story 129. The first international cricket match was held in 1844 in New York between United States and Canada. Story 130. I was a stand-in for an actress who won an Academy Award for her performance in the 70s released film we worked on together. Story 131. My best friends are called Bianca Way, which translates to white, and Adrian Schwartz, which translates to dark black. Adrian is the palest redhead you'll ever see, and Bianca was adopted from Eritrea and is black. Story 132. One of my wisdom teeth is a baby tooth. Like it's not a big molar or anything, it's just this lil guy like a lil baby tooth. Story 133. I had dry needling done last year in March. She went too deep in my thoracic region and punctured both my lungs. I knew something was immediately wrong and she told me it was anxiety. The clinic was right next to a doctor's surgery, so I walked straight in and said I was having severe chest pain and trouble breathing. Doctor told me it was anxiety and referred pain from the massage. I said I think it might be a collapsed lung. He told me that was ridiculous. I go home, and within a few hours, I had my sister take me to emergency. They tell me same thing. It's likely anxiety. I sit around for hours waiting for chest x-ray. The moment the x-ray is done, 2 doctors and 2 nurses rushed at me, told me I had suffered a bilateral pneumothorax of more than 30 to both lungs, and I was admitted into the respiratory ward for a few days on oxygen therapy. Fudge anxiety, all right? Story 134. My grandfather was a multi-billionaire, and he'd take down his wife, went to prison and died, and now I work at the prison he went to. Story 135. I was on a YouTube compilation with PewDiePie before he was famous. The video has since been lost to time, so I have no proof, but I remember it vividly, and then being surprised when he grew to fame. Story 136. Am allergic to cold temperatures. Me, I'm allergic to the cold. People, oh, haha, me too. Me, no, I'm serious. Can't swim alone. I get hives daily. Legit allergic. People, why would I make this up? Story 137. Arm broke in 2 places, an elbow dislocated and back into place on its own in a fall. Went 3 months without intervention, simply waiting for the pain to go away. It was a first date. He gave me a big, tight hug at the end of the night with my arm across my stomach. I winced, and he told me there was no way it hurt that bad. Story 138. I've been kidnapped before. I can't breathe when there is water chest height or higher on me. This could be while swimming, in the shower with the water running down, or having a hose sprayed chest or above. I was never meant to happen. My mother only has 1 ovary and was believed to be sterile following the birth of my brother due to some injuries. My father had had a vasectomy. I am one of 8 children. We all have OCD. We were not all raised in the same environment or with the same parental pair. Additionally, me and all my sisters have the same chromosomal microdeletions, despite our mother not carrying the gene believed to influence this specific condition. It doesn't really affect us much, but it's weird we all have it since we have different fathers. Story 139. I grew up on a little bit of idyllic land outside Philadelphia. I met my husband from northern New. Around the same, my parents decided to sell the land to a real estate developer and move to central Pennsylvania. The day before I was set to move to New with my new boyfriend, who I had only known at this point about 6 months, I was walking around the property now torn apart by bulldozers. I was thinking that I needed a sign that I should move, looking down at the soil, hoping for a projectile point or something along those lines. I have a degree in archaeology. Instead, my dog kind of jumped a little and I looked up as 2 deer and a fox ran right by me. And I mean so close I could have reached out to touch them. Additionally, my dog, who was not leashed, made no move to chase them, and he was definitely the type who would have. It was so strange that I stood there for a little while wondering if there was something wrong with me and if I hallucinated the scene. But in the end, I decided I did not, and it was the sign I had asked for. I should also mention that I met my husband online in the late 90s, and his online handle was Sly Fox. We've had a great, happy life together, so I'm glad I listened. I don't tell that story to anyone figuring no one would believe me. Story 140. I can't burp. Have never burped once in my life. It's a condition called RCPD and was only recently diagnosed. Cure is a Botox injection in the throat. Causes severe bloating since the gas only has 1 escape route. By the end of any given day, I look like I'm about 6 months pregnant. Wake up each morning with a flat stomach. Story 141. On 3 consecutive days, I had birds fly into my windshield on my morning commute. Hawk, buzzard, dove. The appointment at the shop was some days later, so only 1 windshield replaced, but with 3 cracks. Never happened again. Now 15 years ago. I thought someone must have put a spell on me, or a spiritual sign of some sorts wanted to tell me something. Story 142. I was almost kidnapped on a Swiss train station platform when I was 14. My track running experience saved my life. I grew up in a small municipality of 9K people with 1 main road, and Missy Elliott has a house there. I've trick-or-treated at her house as a kid. She gave the king-size candy bars. Story 143. My ancestors defeated the Aztec Empire in a fight by switching sides in the last minute. That's right, boys. Whenever I flip-flop from the Angels to the Dodgers, that's my ancestor blood in me telling me to bandwagon. Story 144. In the summer of 2005, my dog was attacked by a pit bull. The brakes in the car I had just been driving and on the highway failed. I had my first panic attack while driving and slammed my face my finger in a car door. I was also alone all summer since my parents worked and I had no friends. That summer fudged me up and now I'm mentally unwell. I also had sepsis after my C-section and later severe necrotizing pancreatitis that kept me in the hospital for 2 months. I also switched schools every year after 3rd grade and never learned how to make friends. Apparently God disliked me. Story 145. I drooled on Bill Cosby when I was a baby. My mother worked in the green room on the Johnny Carson show at NBC Studios. Apparently, I was there visiting the set with my father, and we were allowed to watch the show from the green room, which was where guests of the show would wait and be waited on by waitresses just before going on stage. Story 146. I literally witnessed a man being split in half in a car crash. I experienced it as a child as well. I can still imagine it. If you guys want details, hit me up. Story 147. My great-great-uncle was the first guy to attempt to go under the Antarctica in a submarine that he bought from the U.S. for $1, but his crew mutinied. He was the first to fly over it and knew it because the compass span in a circle. Story 148. I graduated vet school with honors, worked for 3-4 years, and now I work as a landscape designer in permaculture. Nobody believes him was a vet. Story 149. I blacked out on the train tracks in my town, accepted my fate, and woke up in bed some odd hours later. Thank God. Story 150. The actual Olympics didn't like my viral TikTok video, so they falsely reported it as copyright infringement, even though I didn't post any clips in it. Also, multiple Olympians and John Green used the sound from that video, so that was cool. Story 151. I travel a lot. And 1 year, the airlines lost my bag every single time I got on a plane except once. Out of 10 flights, my bag was lost 9 times. And boy, was that one time a pleasant surprise. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchoose. See you soon.